Python, reiteration or loop constructs using for loop and while loop. Well, computers do not have intelligence on their own. They cannot learn, they cannot think on their own. The logic has to be given to them. Here, this computer has a problem. It has got to put these 6 balls into the bin. It does not know counting on its own, so it needs a counter. It needs somebody to count. So there is the counter. And as the first ball goes in, counter is updated to 1. Second ball 2. There goes the third ball inside the bin, 3. Next ball 4. Fifth ball, counter is on 5. Sixth ball, and counter is updated to 6. And this is how it is done for the computer. That's the very concept of loops or reiteration in programming languages. Let us discover loops in Python now. So like any program, this program is also a linear program. 9 lines are there. Computer programs are linear. First line executes, then second line, and so on. But sometimes there are situations where we need to execute certain lines more than once. So program flow which has already moved on to the next line, how do we manage to bring it back to the previous line so that the previous line executes once more? There comes in the concept of loops or reiteration. We'll discover loops in Python now. This program is accepting the runs made by the player in each ball in an over. Now, whatever runs are entered by the user one by one for each ball, those runs are accumulated in a variable. They are totaled into a variable. And finally, that total runs made in that over is being displayed in this program. If you see, line number 5 is using the keyword for. For is the keyword which is used to implement loops. This is one way to implement loops in Python. Then you see lines 6 and 7. These are the part of loop itself. Now let us understand how this for loop is going to work. For variable name in range function. Range function is accepting 2 arguments here. Both are numbers, 1 and 7. 1 is the starting number and 7 is the maximum limit. Maximum limit is always 1 more than the required. So here range function is going to create a list of 6 numbers, 1 2 3 4 5 6, and for each number for loop will execute. That means for loop is going to execute for 6 times. First of all, value 1 will come into the variable ball. The program control will come to line 6. Line 6 is executing. User will enter the runs made, whatever value it is. That is accumulated in total runs variable in line 7. Next, number 2 will come into variable ball. Loop will execute the second time. Similarly, the third time, number 3 will come into variable ball. After that, number 4, then 5, finally 6. This way, loop will execute for 6 times, one by one. And whatever numbers, whatever values are entered by the users during the execution of line 6, they will be totaled in line number 7. Total runs plus equal to runs made. And finally, when the loop is over, line 9 will execute. It is not the part of loop. Total runs will be displayed to the user. Let us see the output now. Enter runs in ball 1, 2, second ball no runs made, third ball 1 run scored, fourth ball was a 4, fifth ball no run, sixth ball 2 runs, total 9 runs made. So this is how it is working. Enter runs in ball 1. So enter runs in ball. This is coming from line number 6. Line number 6, as you can see, is executing 6 times. So this is the flow of loops in a Python program. We just saw a simple loop which was counting across a list of numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The counting was very usual: 1 plus 1, 2, 2 plus 1, 3, and so on. But sometimes we need to count not by 1, but maybe by 2 or 3 or more, we need to skip. That is done by the third argument in range function. As you see here, line 3, range function is accepting now 3 parameters, 3 arguments. One, it is going to generate a list of numbers from 1 to 9. 10 is the maximum limit, and 2 is the stepping. 2 is being added to the counting, and that's why this output. Let us see how we can put one loop into another loop. As you see here, line number 9, 10 and 11. This loop, line number 9, 10 and 11, this loop is executing for 1 over. Above that, you see line number 6 is the parent loop or the nesting loop. Line number 9 is a nested loop, a loop inside a loop. First for loop is running for each over. Let us see how it is working. Line number 4 is asking the user how many overs are there. Suppose user says 5 overs. So line number 6 for loop will execute 5 times, once for each over. And for each execution of this for loop, line number 9 for loop will execute for each ball in that over. So overs were 5, that means nested for loop will execute for total 30 times. So for each iteration of parent loop, the nested loop executes. So as you see in for loop, suppose user has entered 2, overs are 2. So what will happen? Range function will generate from 1 a list of numbers from 1 to the value of variable over plus 1. That is, if overs value is 5, the list will be 1 to 4. That is 1, 2, 3, 4. And plus 1 makes it 6 here. So total 5 times the outer loop will execute. And for every execution of outer loop, the inner loop, the nested loop will execute how many times? 6 times. As you see, this will execute for 6 times. The number of balls will be accepted for each over one by one. The team score will be calculated. It will be accumulated. Again, the for loop will run for the next over. Again, this will keep going on for each over and for each ball in that over. And finally, the team score will be displayed. See line 13. So this is how nested loops work. Always remember, a nested loop executes for each iteration of its parent loop. Let us see how it is working here. How many overs? Let's say 2 overs. So outer loop will execute 2 times. Inner loop will execute 12 times. 6 balls in 1 over. See? This is the first iteration of the nested loop. Now for over 2, second iteration of nested loop. And whatever total team score is there, that is being displayed. So that's the very simple concept of nested loops in Python. Let us see here one more example of a nested loop. We are going to learn many interesting things in this program. See line 2. Line 2 has a variable runs made per over. Did you notice how it is initialized? It is initialized by 2 square brackets. That means this is not an ordinary variable. This variable is a list. List means a set of values. Here it is an empty list. No values are mentioned. In a list, values are mentioned within square brackets. No values within square brackets means this is at the moment an empty list. Variable team score is there as usual, 0. We are asking the user how many overs. The outer for loop will execute as many times over plus 1, and inner loop will execute as usual for every iteration of outer for loop. That is as usual, runs for each ball will be accepted. What is interesting here is how we are appending the values entered by the user into the list. Earlier the list was blank. Append function on the list actually adds or appends the values given to it into the end of the list. So user has entered some number, runs made per over dot append function. That value is passed as argument into append function. and this function is appending this value into the list. All the values entered by the user will be held in the list. We are printing the contents of the list also in line number 12. We are using another simple for loop which will go through this list. You see, for r in runs made per hour. This is the list of those runs entered by the user. And one by one, the values from the list runs made per hour will come into the variable r. And in line 15, their total is being calculated in the variable team score. And ultimately, finally, in line 17, the entire team score is displayed. So that's a very interesting program. Let us see the output. Second over is going through. And here is the list of runs displayed. See, you see the 12 values are in the list, and finally the score, team score, is displayed. So that is another example of using for loop. We also learned how to create a list of values. Now, a loop which can execute in one direction, it can also execute in reverse direction. Notice line number 2 here. Range function is stepping by -1 from 7 to 1. It's not 1 to 7, it is exactly the reverse. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Here 1 became the upper limit, so it is counting till 2. Moving further, let us discover about another keyword, while keyword. While is also used to implement loops in Python, but in a very different way. So we will see in line number 2, you see for loop is implemented. Whatever for loop is doing here, while loop is also doing. So what for loop is doing here, you can easily figure out. For loop is displaying the numbers from 1 to 6, plain and simple. The same thing is being done by while loop below. You see, in for loop, the values are increasing on their own automatically. But in while loop, that has to be taken care of by the programmer. You see line number 5, a variable a is initialized by 1. While loop always takes a condition, at least one condition with itself. Here the condition is as long as a is less than 7. A is currently 1, so this condition is true. This condition will remain true for values 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And for all these values, line number 7 will execute. And in line number 8, the value of a will be incremented by 1. So these two lines, 7 and 8, are the part of while loop. So as a will be incremented from 1 to 2, the program control will go back to line 6. 2 is less than 7. 2 is displayed. A is equal to a plus 1, 3. Program control goes back to line number 6. 3 less than 7, true. Line number 7, 3 is displayed, and so on till a becomes 7. As long as a becomes 7, as soon as it becomes 7, the condition becomes false and loop finishes, loop terminates. So this is how while loop is working, how it is different from for loop. In while loop, you have to control the execution of the loop by incrementing or decreasing that variable's value. Let us have a quick look at some examples of while loop here. I have put certain examples into one file. One by one, we will look at these programs. Let us have a look at the first program, that is line number 4. User is entering a number, and whatever numbers are entered, those are 5 numbers actually. A is 0, line number 5, A is 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. That is 5 times this loop is executing. Whatever is user entering is being calculated, is being totaled into a variable called sum. And after the loop, in line number 10, the average of all the values is displayed. See, 3.0, 15 by 5, that is 3.0. Let us move on to the next program. Line number 15, A is initialized to 10. See, it is 10. And condition is as long as A is greater than or equal to 1. So that is 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. For these values, this loop will execute and will display the values A minus equal to 1. Here A is being decreased. This loop is working in reverse. A is decreased by 1. So user or the programmer has to control while loop. That's the responsibility of the programmer actually. Coming on to the next program, nested while loops. Let us see. There are two variables in line number 23. Both are A and B, both are set to 0, initialized to 0. So this outer loop, parent loop, is saying A less than equal to 5. And for each iteration, you see B, line number 26, B is initialized to 5 again and again. For every iteration, B will be reset to 5. So when inner loop while will execute, B will always be set to 5. And how long, what values it will check for? B greater than or equal to A. So see, first time A was 0, so B was 543210. And B is decreasing, A is increasing. So inner loop is working in reverse order, outer loop is working in as usual way. A is 1, so output variable B is displaying 54321. A is 2, variable B is 5432. A is 3, variable B is 543. And A is 4, variable B is 54. A is 5, variable B will also be 5 because inner loop has the condition B greater than equal to A. The same thing is being done by the next example in line 35. The only difference is that inner loop is for loop, and there we are not going to control the loop. It will take care of it on its own. What we are doing is we are creating the range from 5 to A minus 1, 1 less, because stepping will start in reverse. See, minus 1 is the third argument and output will be same. So these are certain examples of while loop. I've shown you how to use nested loops, how to nest for loop inside a while loop, and any which way combinations are possible. That depends how suitable you find which loop, and you can use it. Now let us see how do we control the loops in different ways. Generally what happens, you have seen the loops are given a condition or given a list of values, and for each value, or as long as the condition is true, the loop is executing through all the iterations. But there are certain situations where we need to terminate the loop midway. When the task is still not over, we might need to get rid of the loop. Let us see how do we do it here. See line 4. I am implementing an infinite loop or a forever loop. Loop will execute as long as condition is true. And here I have mentioned true. That means this loop is going to go forever without stopping. But in such case, I have made some provision to terminate the loop. Loop termination is done by the help of break keyword. You see line 7. Break, we will see how it is working. So this loop is accepting numbers, calculating total. If user is entering 0, this loop will terminate. Otherwise, this loop will keep going on. If user has entered 0, break keyword will bring the control to line number 10. Here, the total of the values is being displayed, how many times the values have been entered, and then the average of the values is being displayed. Now, if loops can be terminated midway, there is another way where midway you can throw the control back to the beginning of the loop. That is called continuing the loop, or re-continuing the loop midway. That is done by the help of continue keyword, as you see here. What we are doing here is, it is the same program from the previous one, a little modification. See line number 10, continue keyword. Continue keyword will throw back the control to the beginning of the loop, here in our case line number 4. So what we are doing is, we are checking if number is negative, then we are re-continuing the loop. If number is negative, line 8, we are displaying negative number, line 9, and line 10 continue keyword will bring the control back to the line 4, and loop will re-execute midway. So this way we are ignoring negative numbers. On 0 we are breaking the loop, and for all the positive numbers we are calculating the total, and finally we are displaying the average. So see how break and continue keywords work. Break terminates the loop midway. Continue keyword restarts the loop midway. So that is all with for loop and while loop. We have seen various examples, and we strongly hope that this small session will make you confident enough in trying your hands further in loops in Python. Happy learning.